Good morning, everyone. I'm here to give a Grace Kids update this week. So, putting on my children's ministry hat, unlike last week, which was my admin hat. I just wanted to kind of give everybody an idea of what this year looks like. Part of the reason that everyone in the room gets to hear it is because not only does this affect kids that are 5th grade and younger, but so many of you are a part of children's worship because of teaching in either children's worship or sermon study or the nursery. And so I just wanted to remind everyone, the vision of Grace Kids Ministry is to partner with parents to develop children of God that love Christ and love others in and out of the church so that Jesus is glorified. And so we're really just wanting to do that every single time that we're together. And so part of my job is to help parents go along, but also part of your job as the covenant community is to lead children to Jesus and just love on them in and out of the classroom. So today we had our first day of children's worship here in Oak Knoll, and it went amazing. All the kids adjusted really great, and we're super excited to all have classrooms and be in this space. As you saw, the kids will come up to the stage and go out that door like they did this week and kind of line up in the hall. So that's a little training note for those of you that teach. And then once I did it wrong today, we will enter back in on the back door so that kids are not walking up through the front during communion. So we'll, help each other out with that. This year, we've kind of changed up the class groups a little bit. I'm going to have a class for preschool and kindergartners that are going to be doing a new curriculum called Exploring the Elements of Worship. And you've seen on the last 2 weeks these new symbols on the corner of the slides. They also match the kids' bulletin. And then this curriculum goes alongside that. So it's going to be teaching the kids about each of the aspects of worship over the course of a year. And then they can, pull it into here and say, oh, I know what that picture means. And they can understand what part of the service we're on. And then they can follow along on their kids' bulletin. And so we're trying to just, raise up the kids to understand what it's like to be in corporate worship. And so helping them along during that time in different ways. And it also is just nice for adults to be able to follow along sometimes. For our second class, it's going to be 1st through 3rd graders, and so that's a little bit of a change. They will continue doing the Dwell curriculum that they've been doing for years, but we're going to add in an aspect of Acts prayer to their class. And so over the course of the year, they'll be learning how to pray the Acts prayer, what the different parts of it mean, and just using that in the class. So if you're a teacher, I will be sending short videos in your weekly teaching email, so please make sure you watch those. In addition, watch the 13-minute training video that I sent out late Friday night, and it's in your best interest to watch the whole entire thing. If you've already seen it, don't tell why. For the ministry schedule, it just came out last week. Please make sure that you look at it and see if you have any conflicts and go ahead and get trades for those conflicts, especially with this new curriculum. It's pretty imperative that I know who is going to be serving before I send that email. And I'm trying to send those emails on Monday. So if obviously things come up at the last minute and that's not a big deal, but it would be helpful for me if I knew, oh, you're not going to be here this Friday. I don't want to know that after you get the email. Sunday. I don't want to know that after you get the email. I'd rather know that before I send the emails. Just also, in regards to the ministry schedule, I know that sometimes it feels like, oh, I'm told I have to do this, but ultimately we are a covenant community, and everyone in this room makes an impact on kids in some way. And so we all have a role to raise up the next generation within our church. And so it's just like, I would love for you to look at that as a blessing for yourself and see how the kids can teach you something on a Sunday morning and how you can love on the kids even more on Sunday mornings rather than feeling like it's just a chore that, you're told you have to do. And so when we have a perspective of doing this all together and everyone having an impact, it changes, the way that we view children's worship and sermon study and even the nursery. Like, we are all impacting those kids. Finally, Sunday Communities begins in 2 weeks on September 7th. The kids today, anyone in nursery through 5th grade, have the opportunity to kind of get a preview of what we'll be doing. So The classroom is room 205, where all the kids will meet today and every time we have Sunday communities for Grace Kids Worship. So it's down the hall right past the nursery. And then today we'll have a 30-minute time, 30-ish minute time during the meeting. And but any other time we'll have the full hour on a Sunday community time. And so you always would meet in room 205. And I think I'll have you pick your kids up in that room that you're coming back to, but TBD, because it feels like this, bringing them back here might feel a little different than another time, but we'll see.
So I think a lot of you guys know that about a year ago, the elders started with a retreat, just beginning to think about coming as we were planning for our 20th year, thinking about the next 10 years in terms of where we're headed, maybe some ministry objectives that we have, and maybe even looking at our mission and vision statements and kind of reconsidering as we head into the next 10 years, as we're coming on the first 20 years, what God might have for us. And so this is kind of the culmination and the beginning of living out of that process. We met several times. We interacted with a guy outside of our church who works with Jordan Peace, Chris Lerman, who's really good at helping process mission and vision. And so we got a mission statement which we shared a while ago. So on this first page here, you should be with the logo, Grace Community. That's our new mission statement, which is probably not new to most of you. If you're visiting, maybe it's new a little bit. So I'll just remind you of our mission statement, but what I really want to spend the bulk of the time is on our strategic ministry objectives, which are probably new to most of you in the room. So our mission statement is building a home where people find belonging, rest, growth, and purpose in Jesus. And by home, we actually, Randy, in God's providence, we just sang a song, I want to dwell in the house of the Lord forever, surely as the morning. So it's that image of house of the Lord that runs throughout the Bible that isn't tied to a building, right? We just move buildings. We do have a ministry house, and we now have another house we're about to close in on this Wednesday. But it's more the theme of the home that's in the Bible, and that has this image of being in Christ, and that idea of when you've been away from vacation or at a work trip or just away from your home, there's something about coming back and sleeping in your own bed and being at your home that you feel cozy and known and secure, hopefully, in your homes. And even as you raise your kids, if you've already done that or raising your kids now, you want them to be a place, like I want our house to be a place where our kids want to be, and they do. They come to our house a lot. And that's the image that we want in building a home. It's not necessarily, though it is in part of our plans, an actual church facility, but it's more the image of home and the metaphor of home than it is a physical home. Building a home where these things are true, where people find belonging, rest, growth, and purpose in Jesus. Those are well thought of, well debated, thought through ideas and words on the past year. So that's what we're going with and we're excited about. And I am going to spend 6 weeks starting September 7th preaching on just that statement. So I'm going to do more of a systematic theological sermon on home and belonging, rest, growth, and 2 on purpose is probably what I'm going to do. It'll be September and October with a couple weeks off that we'll kind of think more about that as a church, because we want that mission statement is actually, you can remember this mission statement, unlike my last one, because this is 13 words. The last one was 113 words. And so where it's much more concise, and especially in our community groups this fall, we're going to design Bible studies that are basically sermon response studies that I will give to our leaders, and they will go through 6 studies just on this mission statement so that we're kind of on the same page, aiming at the same thing. So when you talk about Grace Community, you're talking about, hey, this is a church home where people can belong, and maybe you haven't had a church you belonged in, or maybe you've had a church where it was a bad experience, and we would love you to come in here and feel like you belong and can rest, you can grow, you can find purpose in your life. And so we'll think that through together as a community, September, October, November. I know community groups might go into November or even December before they finish those, depending on your frequency. If you're not in a community group, I think most people as I look out are, then please talk to me and think about joining one in general, but also for this fall. Second on your page is the D's. The D's are not gone. I quoted them today, and they remain what was sort of our mission statement. Where to go is now sort of our core value, and I used it. It was just, again, God's providence. I wasn't thinking this through, but it's like planning it through anyway. to close on what dangerous living is and how we think about dangerous living, but I gave that quote at the end of the sermon. That remains. These are the core values of what we value as a church, that we are drawn together by grace, that we are drawn together for delightful, dependent, and dangerous living. They undergird and are core to how we approach this mission statement, how we try to live that out. This is who we are, and then as well as the objectives that are newer today. So I did this week, I'd never done this before, but with some help added a verse connected to each one that we kind of think about. Those are symbolic, or not symbolic, but central to what each of those core values are. So let me stop there. I don't know that if there's any questions about the whole process, why we're doing this, or a question on the mission statement or the core values before I get to what's probably new before you, the ministry objectives this morning. Any thoughts, questions? Joey? Thumbs up. Okay, thanks. Thanks, Joey. Appreciate that. That's good. We'll take that too. Okay, so the strategic ministry objectives have been more of a January through now, or maybe March through now thing that the elders have led off of our mission statement. How is this going to be true of us? What is God particularly giving us to do and focus on in the next 5 to 10 years, beginning now? And so the elders led sub-teams that had deacons on them, staff member on them, and then various other leaders. Some of you guys were on the teams. I think maybe 20 people were on one of these 5 teams, and they met several times, sent their work back to the elders. But actually, before I said that, that's the tactic stuff. These mission objectives were created by the elders mainly, tweaked a little bit by those teams and wording, but mainly we're already sort of set. And so as the elders prayed and thought and worked with Chris, these are the things that we think that God wants us to pursue. Some of them you're like, don't we do that already? Yes, we do that already, but we're going to do that in different ways in the next 5 or 10 years. And some of the things we want to keep on doing, but some we want to go into deeper, and it also might change direction in terms of our effort and time and even staffing and focus. So these are they. And what you have, I'm going to explain what you have in your hand, and then I want you to go back to the 5 statements there. What you have in your hand is an example of one, number 4, down to tactics and years of what that's going to look like. I'll walk through that more quickly at the end, but we wanted this to not just be, hey, these are up here objectives. What does that actually look like? It doesn't mean that all those things are going to happen right now. And in fact, some of the wisdom and the work left to do is among the elders and staff to figure out how do we meld these 5 objectives with all their tactics in a not overwhelming fashion. Like, how do we figure out where we want to go first? And so some of these timelines might actually change for these objectives, but these are things, the tactics are, how will we know if we live that out? In 10 years, how will we know if we're cultivating a welcoming, Christ-centered worship environment and community? You don't have the tactics before you, but there are tactics listed like number 4. Am I losing my mic or no? Is it good? Oh, we took the main down. Okay, you can hear me. Okay, I'll just keep talking loud. Okay, so those tactics we'll get to, but the 5 mission objectives are these. Cultivating a welcoming, Christ-centered worship environment and community. And we've hopefully already been doing that, right? Right, Randy? We've been doing that. But we want to keep on doing that. Randy was on that team, by the way. And there's different ways we want to continue to focus that. I'm going to give you an example of each of what that might look like and what's on sort of the tactics of each team. One of them is in particular, and Christy was on this team, and it was good that she was, and her focus as kids was like, hey, what about kids? How are we doing that intergenerationally? So that's a big focus, and those tactics kind of come out. That's one of the reasons why we have kids stay in worship as long as they do, and then also how we thought through how we enter them back in for the full worship service when they come into 6th grade, and even a little more piece of it in 4th and 5th grade. But one tactic is that how do we equip parents to do family worship? Ross and Christy are leading a 3-week study, September 7th, September 14th, and September 21st. The first 3 Sundays of Sunday Communities, a 3-week study on this book. And if you're in another Sunday community or can't make it to it, I recommend it. It will take you probably an hour and 10 minutes. That's how long it took me to read the book. It's like 100 pages. And I'll just give you some highlights so that if you don't come to the class, you at least pick up the book, which is out on the table, and read it. And then you can talk to Ross or Christy or Tyler, Megan, someone else was on their team. I can't quite remember. Or you can go to the class. But this is where we want. This isn't something we have not talked about before, but it's an area we want to grow in more, is how to encourage family worship. And this book does a great job of the what, the why, and the how in a very simple, easy to read, easy to understand format. If you're like me and you've raised kids, maybe you can look back and go, oh, this would have been a helpful book. Or if you're doing that, or if you're looking forward to it, it's always an area that people sort of have questions about and maybe struggle with, right? I struggled in it because every time we had fits and starts in the Dowda home over the years was Jen would stop me and say, why are you preaching a sermon again? I thought this was family worship. It's not the same thing. I always went overboard. We have to have these amazing, dynamic 45-minute conversations with my 6, 4, and 2-year-old. That doesn't really work so well. So it doesn't work well. And so we kind of battled, and honestly, we weren't great at it. The Dowdas were not great at it. That would be one of the scroll things on there. But it talks about being reverent, and reverent doesn't mean stiff. It says you can still do it in PJs, but that you're coming to worship. You're having a time of worship as a family, being consistent. And one of the things that was encouraging was like, hey, it might be that you only do a 10-minute time, like a 10-minute time consistently done over 18 years would be an amazing accomplishment, right? Versus what I often did, 45 minutes every 3 months, right? That's not as good as consistently 10, 15 minutes as a family reading and doing those things would be great. Joyful, and it encourages to start slow in this book. And so I want to encourage you to pick this up and read it. It would be better if you read it before it starts. You'll get more out of it, maybe have more questions in it. And one of the things that I did too, one of the things, what family worship is not, I thought this was a really good thing. It's not a time for parents to use the Bible to rebuke their kids. See, the Bible says this, and like your kids will not want to come to that time. I was like, oh, I did that sometimes, using the Bible against your kids in quote unquote family worship. Not a good thing, right? You want a joyful time where kids want to come and sing songs and look at the Bible and consider those things. That's within this ministry objective. How do we do that more here corporately? Because family worship doesn't replace corporate worship, but how do we also encourage that in the homes for people who have kids in their homes or grandkids? I'm looking forward to second chance of grandkid in my home once in a while, right? For that. So that's kind of one. There's obviously a lot more to that will come in that ministry objective, but again, I'm not going to do all of them that much. I'm going to keep going through there. If you have a question, you're going to shoot your hand up or just start talking, because you can amplify as well as I can at this point, right? So second thing, build a robust discipleship and leadership pathway. One of the great things about starting a church plant 20 years ago was there were a lot of people at West End Pres that, it was a big church, bigger, probably 2.5, 3 times as big as us at that point, that just there weren't spaces for people to lead. And so when we started our church plant, there were people who like had avenues to lead because we needed a lot of leaders, right? And so, and they quickly jumped in there, and some of them are still leading at our church today, and some went on to other churches. And so we realized we have to create more paths that way. We have a lot of new people in the last 2 or 3 years in the life of our church, and sometimes leadership still falls to this person or that person. And so we want to create new paths for leadership. We need more leaders, especially as we pursue these objectives. And so we're going to start creating that. Leading by grace, that whole 2-year thing is obviously a tactic towards that objective. How do we do that? And so it's particularly geared if you're newer to the church. If you feel like, I'm not even sure if I am a leader, everyone is a leader in some way, and there's a role for everyone to lead within this church or in the wider community. Some of your leadership might be outside of the church, and that's great too, but that course, Leading with Grace, we'd love for you to take part, especially if you're newer, to kind of understand what it means to lead at grace and also lead with grace. And then a robust discipleship. We have a discipleship plan and pathway for every age already, but we want that to be more robust. Any questions? What there? Okay. Deepening community and relational intimacy across the church. That might not have been one that you would have thought about, like worship, leadership. That's one that we settled on as elders as something we want to focus on. Community has been, if people come to our church, like there's weaknesses we have, but one of the strengths over 20 years has been a strong sense of community and belonging and people caring for one another and people being welcomed. So we want to keep developing that. But across the church, there's a little intergenerational tactics that are connected to that objective. And we've started working on some of those things, some of those men and women's events. The Fall Fiesta is just noticing, hey, men and women don't always get together across households. And so that might be a way to do that. Or we've been doing that more with kids. Or one of the things I heard from 2 different community groups that experienced it last year is 2 community groups. So which are great, but sometimes get siloed. They met together and had a worship night, and most people who went to that really enjoyed that experience together, but also with another community group. So there were maybe 20 people, 30, I don't know how many there were, 20, 25 people in the room. So more things like that we're connecting both in serving and creating that. And one of their things, just to give you, it's not just events, it's also how we change as people. I thought this was a bold one that team came up with. Normalize relational repair and reconciliation as part of church life, as is with relational intimacy. That part of that intimacy is, wow, that would be a really great thing for a church to be known by or to experience, where you get upset with someone, you sin against someone, something goes wrong, and I could have the expectation in this church it could be repaired, or I could have forgiveness. That would be great. Like that's a character thing of a church or a person that we want to see within this objective. That's part of intimacy, right? It's not just sharing things. It's actually being all right with when you mess up, making things right. And so I don't know about you, but most of us need help there, right? And so we're going to think about how we can help that. Okay. I'm going to hop to 5 because I'm going to come back to 4 because we're going to spend more time there. Any questions on the first 3 or comments? You can also have a comment. If anyone just wants a break from hearing my voice for 50 minutes today. All right, you want to hear? Oh, thanks, guys. All right. Okay. 5, invest in enduring infrastructure, space, staff, and systems. So we had a team that looked at that and thought of tactics like perhaps maybe we should pursue another ministry house for a long-term property. So like, boom, check. That group was like feeling good. Like we've already done a significant portion. We do close this Wednesday on that house, but that team, not that team necessarily, but under that objective will be how do we think about use of that house in the short term? Short term could be 5, 10, who knows how long the short term is going to be, but we bought that property to put a church building on long term. We don't know when that long term will be, but I remember some tactics within that team was maybe we figure out the long term, where that would go, how that would do, even if we're years away from doing that, and that might help us figure out how we would use the new house that we have, which is a resource. Like how could we use that? So we're going to have a team that maybe in conjunction with figuring a long-term plan thinks through the short term, right? So just give you an example of why that might be important. That house, likely long-term, where the road for the church, if we had a church building behind, or wherever the church building is going to be, the road across the airport hangar is an open intersection, not where our road will close, the current road, and likely, I've been told by Keith Skolton, and he knows things better than me, that road will go straight out from the hangar and extend. We'll have to move our entrance, right, which goes directly to the house that we're at. So will that house be able to be there? Could we do a route here and a route there? Like figuring that out long term, we'll know how long we're going to have that house, right? And then how do we use it? How much upkeep do we give to it? I've already gotten 2 or 3 fantastic ideas about using that house for ministry in certain ways. We need to figure that out, but that's within that. Staff the same way. Like, I don't know if you guys know this. I don't know who was on. I think someone was. I think Matt Belton might have been on the first personnel team. Were you on the first personnel team we had in the beginning of the church? I remember you were. Do you want to be on the next personnel team, Matt, that we need? We have not had a personnel team since like year 2 of the church. Like we were booming, had a personnel team. It's kind of like with signs now. It's like, it's maybe time to grow up, church. And it's maybe time for us to have a personnel team. A lot of that falls to the elders, some falls to the finance team, but that came back from this group. Like, how about a personnel team that thinks through not just the hiring of staff, but also their well-being, how they're being invested into community, into like training or support, things like that, certainly pay and benefits and things like that. So probably on the shorter, not longer end is developing a personnel team that can help support our staff and determine, the elders have wrestled with this, we'll wrestle with this fall, are we at a point in the next year or so about thinking about adding somebody else full-time to do some of these some ministry and to come along for some of these objectives. We actually are big enough to begin to consider that, and the elders have seen that need in the last couple years, and so that's something along with the personnel team that we might execute on in the next year or 2. But we need people to support the staff we have, as well as kind of be a part of that process. And then systems, things like communication. How do we communicate? A lot of this falls to Christy, but she's developed our website and still developing it, our social media, or again, staff support as a system, or safety, like the safety team is working. What's our system here? What's our system of safety at the homes that we have now or our property? So there's a lot of infrastructure stuff that we need to invest in. Some is resources, some is developing some of those things. I'm going to stop there on number 5. Okay, so I'll turn to number 4, which is an outwardly focused, not that the other ones aren't outwardly focused, but this is more directly outwardly focused than the others. To see every home in Hanover County flourish through expanded community presence, deepened partnerships, and the transformative power of faith and service. So, and I'm going to walk through the document that you have, not every single aspect of it, but some aspects of it. You guys have noticed in the last couple years, our Mercy team has grown both in terms of people, which has been fantastic. There have been people on that team for years, and now that team has gone from 4 core members, which it usually had, to 12 core members. That's huge growth for us, and so we're onboarding people onto that. It's allowing us to not burn people out, for one, and also to give people an experience of being involved in the work of Mercy. So this objective is basically leaning into that even more, right, in our community, saying, hey, we think that's where God is leading us, and we want to lean into that even more significantly. And you see some of the ways in which that is listed. So all these ministry objectives came up with, if we're successful in pursuing this objective in the next 10 years, these things will be true. So for this team, which I was on, these 5 things would be true after a period of 10 years, if we're successful, God willing, God blessing us, in seeing every home in Hanover County flourish through expanded community presence, deepened partnerships, and the transformative power of faith and service. Yes, I know that's kind of big picture. It's almost like a mission within an objective. But if that's true, then we will see these things. So let me read with you these A through E, and then I'll talk through some tactics just so you go from, yeah, how will we actually do that? We will have members of our church at the leadership level of our community partners, Family Engagement and Welcome Center, that's the school system, Hanover Safe Place, DSS. So we partner on a Mercy team level, but it's kind of like it's great, it's fantastic. We respond to people's needs and we meet them, and you guys know about that. More money has come in. We used to be a church that brought in about $10,000 a year for the first 15 years of our Mercy Fund. The last 4 or 5 years, we're bringing in $50,000 or $60,000. So numerically, we're giving a lot more money away. We're able to help a lot more people. That's kind of one-on-one. This is kind of backing up and saying, hey, it'd be great for us to be more engaged. Like maybe the Family Engagement and Welcome Center would want somebody from our church at the leadership level on the school system thinking about needs, or thinking about Hanover Safe Place. How's that organization going? So if this objective was reached, we would have people maybe on boards, maybe serving alongside some of these organizations that right now we kind of get referrals to and have great relationships with. That's some of the thought there. That's how we know if we're successful in this area. Secondly, we'll be a part of evaluating and expanding the scope of services available to Hanover County residents with disabilities, beginning with housing and occupational opportunities. Anybody who has a child or a young adult with special needs will understand this objective, and anybody who's at Grace Community at one level will understand this objective, right? That's a part of who we are as a church. Again, when we started this church, if you're new, that wasn't like, hey, this is going to be what this church is about. It came actually just from going, how can we bless this community? How can we be a part of this community? And from Capernaum and there kind of flowed how our congregation is different. And so we want to lean more into that, particularly for our members and the families of our members who have getting older, right? Like Kit's turning 40, right? Isn't he? Yep. He's got a big party coming up, and there's things going on. We have Capernaum kids involved, but really they're not kids anymore. We have a lot of young adults who are involved, and middle-aged adults even, with Friends for Life. And some of the issues in life come, where are they going to live? What job are they going to do? That's a big thing when a kid comes 22, 23. What am I going to do during my day? There's so much up to that age and so little, and it's hard to navigate outside of that age. We've been a part of that. We want to be more a part of that, particularly around housing. So that might be something that we do. As we reach out, this is an evangelism goal. We want to see 20 people among those we serve and those we serve with come to faith. Like I know some people in some of the partnerships that we do that are kind of do-gooders in the community. They do amazing things. I can tell in at least one of my friendship that this person is not a believer, but I'm like, well, that's a real relationship I have, that we have something in common. We're serving the community. Maybe I should be wondering about their spiritual well-being, right? Or one of the people that we've helped recently, I feel like is returning to church. I talked to him this week. It's this guy we helped through the Mercy team I've kept up with. It's actually through my son, Sam, and I'm encouraging him to come to faith and come to things. We want to see people come to faith through service. I think this is one of the best apologetics that Christians have. A lot of people don't want to sit down and talk to you about their faith and like have all these built-in roadblocks. But as you serve, they go, oh, these people are different. They're doing the kinds of things that I think are important. Let me explore more their questions. So we expect that. This is pretty in-depth. We want at least 75% of our members, high school age and up, with active mercy practices as part of their Christian world. So if you were thinking, oh, this has nothing to do with me, maybe you're not going to be on the mercy team. Maybe you're not going to be, as you'll see, a team that we think we need to form to get to pursue this objective. But we want 75% of people in 10 years to feel like mercy is a part of my practice as a Christian. It's not something those people do. It's not something the deacons make sure happens. It's something that me as a Christian, in my following of Jesus, it's part of my practice, like prayer is, like sharing the gospel, like coming to corporate worship. So that's a goal. And we will be known by a significant number of community partners and Hanover County residents as a church that walks alongside people with dignity to pursue their flourishing. We are known that way, just to give you a good report, from the school system and from Hanover Safe Place, as a church that will respond and that they can count on to help people in their mission. We would love for more of that to be true, to God's glory, not to our reputation, but that it would be earned out of pursuing this objective. So I won't go through all these things because there's a lot, but you see, and just because I wanted to let you just get a window of, hey, those are big 5 objectives. We're not going to make good on all these by December. These are going to take time to do, and we're not going to. But there's actual tactics to that. So I maybe we'll have to see this, but probably within year 1 we want to establish a different team. The mercy team is kind of like looking at a tree, caring for that. The community engagement team would back up and look at the forest and go, what do we need to do here? And so maybe there's people who like, I'm really good at the mercy. I want to do one-on-one with somebody and see their life change. But maybe somebody else is like, I'm really good at looking at the process and the picture. I would like to see how Hanover County could be changed, how the disability community could be helped better by taking a step back, or maybe how we could partner in ways that the school system, which has direct connection to tons of people in need, how they could do it better, how we could come alongside them more. That would be more someone for the community engagement team that we want to form that would look at the partnership level and would begin with these things that are down in listening tours. We're having Carrie Kukutta, who runs the Family Engagement and Worship Center, come to the Mercy Team meeting next month. This is part of this tactic because we want our partnership to be better. We want to say, hey, how can we support you more? What are things we could do more together? And she's happy to come and share that time with our Mercy Team. But eventually that will be this community engagement team, because the Mercy Team, honestly, is really busy just doing the work, right, of caring for people in need. So you need another team that can sort of evaluate. Maybe there's partners that we haven't thought of that are better, or that we're better able to help and better able to connect with, or how could we go deeper with some of the partners we already have. So those are some of the goals you see in that team. If you're interested particularly in disability, that's, I forget what IDD stands for, but it's disability. There's a group, Hanover ARC, that's pulling together lots of different people that do lots of different ministry in Hanover County for disability, and I got pulled in because of Young Life Capernaum. If you want to be on that kind of level, that's a separate team, you could join in. Maybe you're like, yeah, I would like to see that better in Hanover County. Hearing stories, like we got up, Heather Estes shared. I interviewed, who did I interview? Carrie, who is it? Ed, you, Peter, and who? Carrie? Yeah. Katie Miller, to hear stories. Like I know you guys like to hear stories, to go, hey, how can we be involved as a church? That's some of these tactics. And then you see in years 2 through 5, let me just jump down to 2 through 5, because we don't need to go through all of them. But we continue to evaluate those partnerships, which ones are bubbling up. We identify people, maybe they're in this room now, maybe they're in years 2 or 3, that, hey, you would be really good. Hanover Safe Place would love to have another board member who has this kind of giftedness, and we'd love to be more connected to Hanover Safe Place and shaping what they're doing and being a part of what they're doing. Maybe that's a role for you, right? So, and then we would reach 50%. We'd have, by year 3 or 4, we'd have 50% of the people. Like I won't do a poll right now, but it would be less than that for sure, who would say mercy is an active part of my practice is walking with Jesus, right? We would not be there. But maybe in 3 or 4 years, 50% of people would say, that actually is. Like I've been called in several times to help out. The Mercy Team's already doing that, and will continue to do that, to say, hey, come help move, come help do things where you can be engaged. But the community engagement team would do that even more. We'd see 10 people. I'd see my friend, I won't say his name in case he comes to church, but I would see him come to faith. I would see my friend who runs one of these partnerships come to faith. And then by year 5 to 10, or 5 plus, by year 10, so on the last page, we'd have 75%. Like, right? That's kind of bold. That'd be huge to achieve, to have 75% of our people say, I'm involved in mercy. It's a practice of my life as a Christian. It's not just some subset or we do a project twice a year. That's great. That's not actually what Jesus is calling us to, and not actually what we particularly feel called to at Grace. So we want more of that. We want more people to have come to faith. We might even be exploring a 501c3, being more formally setting up something because God has given us an area in Hanover County to go deeper into, and that's necessary. It might not even be part of the church, but it might be spinning off of the church. I'll give you an example of that. Friends for Life is a separate 501c3 because of our church, because of our involvement with Capernaum. That's spun out as a separate 501c3, as an organization that meets a county need that we've been a part of, a huge part of, in our first 20 years. We'd like to see that more. Maybe there's a housing thing. Maybe I don't know. And then we'd aim to actually have 3 to 5 people on that community partner level. Like, right? That's huge to have like 3 or 5 of our members at the county level. That will necessarily go along, that's the reason for people knowing, oh, this church is serious about embedding itself in this community and making a difference in this community. Do we do things outside of Hanover? Of course, but we are based in Hanover, and so that's part of what we'll do.